Hey guys, I'm at Steadfast Farm in Mesa, Arizona, and this is the new site of Steadfast Farm. This farm has moved 3 times. This is in an agri-hood. It's in a big development with 15,000 homes called Eastmark. And it's a very unique farm because it's really an urban farm. You know, it's in the middle of this great community. There's parks and recreation around here, community center, restaurant right there. This is the site that our 5-day workshop is going to happen on February 25th. I hope to see some of you guys there. But in this video today, I'm going to talk to Eric about how he converted this sort of raw, compacted Arizona clay and salty soil to 30-inch beds that are growing organic vegetables. So it's a different process than what I've done, and it's quite unique to the context here in Arizona. This was quite a process to get this to where it is today.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell us, like, before this all started, what was here before anything?
Right. It was desert, so lowland desert, so very flat, sandy soil, kind of just native vegetation. The whole kind of landmass of this Eastmark community was part of the General Motors proving grounds.
Right.
And so there was, you know, a big track around that they would test cars. So where we're standing was just desert. As they started to do the development, they turned it into a retention area because with Arizona and the way the ground takes water, they have to create areas for that water to go because the ground just doesn't absorb it. And so 100-year flood kind of stuff, they needed to have places for that. So that was this originally.
It was a big bowl, essentially.
It was a bowl, yep.
Right.
It was a big bowl, dropped down a couple feet
Yeah.
in the center. And so, yeah, we had to, you know, change that. And so we wanted to stick with the native soil. And so they were doing a lot of dirt work, only a few hundred yards from here. So in order to bring that up to grade where we need it to be, we brought the same soil that was here so that we weren't importing soil that wasn't native, because we wanted to kind of stick with that.
So what was that, like bulldozers in, just basically pushing around
Yep.
dirt and then packing it down?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, really big kind of earth moving equipment, which is necessary. Water trucks, you know, they're just layering it so you get that good compaction and set. But that creates obviously a lot of issues
A lot
with
of
the
compaction.
A lot of compaction. So, so they spent a lot of time compacting it, and we've spent a lot of time trying to uncompact it and loosen up the soil. So that's been a challenge. I mean, anytime you're starting with like virgin ground that hasn't been worked, farmed, cultivated, there's definitely a process to get it to be productive, and so we're still in that process to get there.
Yeah. So okay. So let's just go through the next step. So excavators came in, leveled it, packed it.
Yeah.
You must have still had some level of runoff ability.
Yep.
So you get 100-year rain. What happens with the water if that happens?
Sure. So if you look at the field, all the beds on the east side, they're all going east-west, and so the far side of the beds is pitching towards the center pathway that we're standing on here. So this is the low part of the farm, and then where the buildings are sitting is higher. So everything is pitching towards the center.
Which is almost this drip line area here.
Yep,
right?
Exactly.
Yep.
And then it's also pitching south. So our greenhouses are almost actually like tiered, you know, or terraced.
Okay, so is there a French drain in there or anything, or is it just basically water's going to move that way if it has to?
Yep, and I mean, it's deceiving because we have all this wood chips on the pathway, but there's
Right.
actually more concave to where we're standing here. We just leveled it out, so water can still pass through the wood chips.
Okay. So once all that was done, leveled, compacted, shaped,
Right.
what was the next stage from there?
Then we took lots of samples for soil tests, plugs from all over the different fields. Just because we were bringing in soil and disturbing all that, we knew that there could be some inconsistencies from place to place, even on such a small plot like this. So we needed to have a lot of samples so we could get a good feel and accurate kind of representation of what we were dealing with. So soil tests, you know, and then lab interpretation, working with an agronomist to figure out what kind of course of action is needed. So identifying what amendments we needed to bring in, which was actually pretty minimal. This native soil, this mineral soil, had a lot of good things in it, but organic matter was low,
Yeah.
microbial life was fairly low,
Yeah.
and so the main things we added were, phosphorus, and because Arizona is very high pH soil, we, using soil sulfur to kind of try to drop that a little bit.
So you wanted to increase some acidity
Correct.
in
Yep.
the soil. So you had probably like an 8 or a 9 pH to start, and you had to bring that down to like, you're trying to get 7 or just trying to get it lower? Like,
Yeah, we're sitting at about mid 8, so
Okay.
8.5, and I think we're now 8.2, which
Okay.
for a lot of people that's going to sound like really low or make it impossible. But actually, I mean, that's what we deal with. That's what I've always dealt with, is in those mid to low 8s, high 7s if we're lucky.
Yeah.
But it still produces great vegetables. But we got to keep an eye on the pH so that it doesn't get away from us.
Well, and the neat thing too about organic farming is if you have a lot of organic matter, that's going to act as sort of a sponge to create equilibrium. Whereas if you were just farming conventional and high pH soil, a conventional farmer would really try to get that corrected because there's no compost in the soil.
Right. Yep.
But in this case, that makes it up for it. So, okay, so you came in, and so you got those tests, but then
Yep.
what? Bring in new soil, or just went straight to compost?
We went straight to compost, so we knew what we were dealing with. Then we looked at local compost, and we, took some of their previous tests, so we could kind of see the makeup of their compost and see how that would also work into the fertility plan of what the soil we're dealing with. So, our soil from the test was a little low in zinc and boron also, but from looking at like the compost, we knew that was going to, just by adding the compost, that was going to take care of some of those kind of trace elements, microelements, and that too. So we were able to not fully amend because we were able to use the compost as part of that puzzle, I guess.
Right.
So we brought on a lot of compost, 320 cubic yards,
Wow.
which is about 10 truckloads over this, 1 acre, just over an acre growing space. So significant. It was about 3 inches, top dress, and then we worked it into the soil. But
Did you form beds and then do compost, or just broadcast compost?
we broadcast it. We basically established the corners of our field blocks.
Okay.
Spread the compost in that field block, and then we used, even though we weren't going for truly raised beds, we used the rotary plow to throw the compost out of the pathway so that we weren't putting good compost on the pathway. And so that we just threw it, and so that was just one pass. Normally you'd have to do 2 passes for each
But it was
bed.
surface level, so you just tossing it. Yeah, right.
And then we rototilled with the BCS all of that compost into the beds themselves, which lifted them a little bit and started watering to kind of work that in, and then came back to finish later with broad forking and power harrowing for final grade.
Wow. Okay, so because this whole field is 1.75, the
Yep.
field block is 1 acre essentially.
Basically, yep.
Okay. So then that was shaping out those beds and these beds here.
Correct.
And then that was pretty much it.
That was it, and then we started growing, and it's been definitely a process. We never expected to have perfect production, because it takes time for that soil to really come together, and for all those nutrients to be available for the plants and that, and so let those micro populations get established in that. So it's been definitely a process.
Okay, so I mean, a question that I have, and I probably assume some of the people who are watching who are knowledgeable on compost and soil, they're going to ask, like, you bought a lot of compost. 300 and what? How many?
320.
320 cubic yards, 10 big truckloads. That's a massive ton of compost. What are some things that you're looking for to make that kind of investment, to bring compost here, trusting that it's going to do what you think it's going to do, or
Sure.
what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, well, it's, our context, I've learned, because this is the most compost we've used on a project thus far in Arizona.
Yeah.
And that we've always just been doing supplemental stuff, because most of it's been established growing areas to an extent, or had been at least worked at one point. This being new, we wanted to get it, we had to bring it a little bit further along. And so the challenge with Arizona compost is A lot of the green waste that's used to make the compost is coming from native trees, so mesquites, palo verdes.
From landscape stuff, that's all the shrubs and all that.
And so those plants are naturally salt tolerant because our groundwater is naturally salty, our soil's naturally salty, and so you have to be really careful with salt load and your EC number, and that because you're essentially importing more salt, which you're trying to avoid. And then, the other component of our compost was dairy manure. The company that makes it uses dairy manure, and again, that industry and the manure that comes out of it tends to be salty in that. So we're really watching for that. We're looking for that organic matter. We're looking for the nitrogen or available nitrogen to the plants. We got to watch for, if it's cured properly and mature. If it's not, then it's just going to pull. It's going to continue to break down and finish in the field, and that's going to suck a lot of the nutrients from the soil, which is not what we want when we need to plant and start doing production immediately. But if you're months out before you're planting, it's not such a big deal because it can just finish and eventually it's going to go full circle. But you just have to be careful and really be asking those compost companies for the data, and then work with your agronomist and make sure that it's good for your specific context.
Yeah, so you can ask for those reports. Like if they're a relatively reputable company, they're going to have documentation of those reports, right? Do they bring in an agronomist that does tests for them, or how do they do that?
I think it depends on the company, but like the company we work with, I think is a member of the U.S. Composting Council, and so I think there are some rules to be a part of that. They're also certified organic through CCOF, and so there's a testing like increment. So maybe not every pile is tested, but along the way they're testing, and so they should have test results pretty close to those batches.
And is there a way that you can be sure, because they might give you a test from another pile and then they might give you another pile? What happens if compost comes here and it's not necessarily what they tested? Is there what's sort of like, I guess what I'm trying to ask is like, what's a double check that a person can do to make sure that they don't get crappy compost? Like, truck comes, what do you do?
Right. Yeah, I don't know that there's 100% foolproof method of doing it, unfortunately. You can test, ask for tests from those specific piles, or send it to, do an independent test with your local soil lab and that, but you're still at their mercy, and some batches are better than others.
I wonder if you could, go to the compost place. I'm just thinking hypothetically, because I bought compost in large volumes before, and could you look at a windrow and say, I want the test for that windrow and I want that windrow? Is that something that...
Hypothetically, yeah.
Would you do that if you wanted to avoid any types of problems?
I think that would, the more you can do to control the variables, the better.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, because it's like with organic farming, you're so dependent on that resource. If you got a bad load of compost, a conventional farmer would be like, whatever, I'll just throw some more nitrogen on the field. But you can't really do that.
No, exactly.
Farmer, right?
I mean, a lot of people make the mistake of not understanding nitrogen, right? So nitrogen in organic farming can be through like a fish fertilizer, it can be chicken manure, it can be cow manure, it can be all sorts of kind of like protein-based like soy fertilizers, alfalfa meal, all these things, worm castings. But a lot of those, it's nitrogen, so it's not a usable form for the plant. Nitrates are what the plant can uptake. So there's a whole process once it hits the soil and has to be broken down before it can be used or the plant can use it. And so that can take weeks, it can take months, depending on the time of year and all that. And so that's, I guess, the appeal of conventional farming, where you can take a chemical fertilizer in nitrate form, put it on the field, and have instant results in that too. And so there's only one nitrate form organic fertilizer that I'm aware of on the market, and that's Chilean nitrate or sodium nitrate. So sodium, so it's basically salt,
Yeah.
mined in Chile, and again, as we're talking, like, that's the last thing I need here, so not an option.
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when you look at a compost, readout,
Yeah.
you really want to, you're looking for all the things, organic matter, balances of the nutrients and whatnot. You mentioned things like boron that you were short on, but what you really need is available nitrogen for the plants, and that's in the form of nitrates.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go, right there. That's especially with these annual vegetables, that's the most available nutrient that they need to grow immediately.
Yeah.
All those other nutrients are important, but to get a carrot out of the ground, it first needs nitrogen, then it's going to need other forms to form that root and all that. So,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, annual vegetables are still really dependent on available nitrogen.
Exactly.
So
that's the food. The other
Yeah.
things are going to help with. I mean, they're also important, but they're more about the quality and the growth. But
Yeah.
if you don't have that available nitrogen, then it's just going to sit there and not do anything.
There you go. Cool. Well, so hopefully that is helpful to people who are going to shop around for compost or build a site like this and add an agri-hood on hard pan ground starting from nothing. So thanks, Eric.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, guys, I hope you found that helpful. If you want to come to this farm, I'd love to have you here. Join Eric and I. This workshop at this farm is going to be very unique compared to other ones that we do, because this is our whole playground all around here. The farm, we've got the community center that we're going to be teaching the class portions of right there next to the restaurant that we're going to be eating our lunches at. And there's tons of available space on this farm. It's super cool. If you got kids, we got a playground right there. There's a pond here. There's a live band that plays the beginning of every month on Friday, which will be the last day of the workshop. So super cool experience, beautiful location. And if you're from a northern climate, it's going to be warm in the winter, which I love. So I hope I'm going to see some of you guys there. I'm going to have a link to that workshop right in the show notes, and there's a discount code for people who want to come as pairs. So you get $400 off if you want to buy 2 tickets. All right, guys, hope to see you there. Talk to you later.